Welcome to Anxious Like You, a podcast hosted by Micheline and Nadia, two therapists who are anxious like you. In each episode, Micheline and Nadia dive into their guests' experience with anxiety and give you the tools you need to face your anxiety head on. This podcast is made in collaboration with Dive Through, a mental wellness company.
On today's episode, we're going to start off with an activity. For the next 30 seconds, no matter what you think about, no matter what you do not think of pink elephants. Again, you can think about anything else. Just don't think of pink elephants. I'm going to set the timer. Ready, set, go. Okay, let's stop. Now, Nadia, what are you thinking about?
Of course, I'm thinking about pink elephants.
You're thinking about pink elephants, but I told you not to.
But it was impossible. It was the only thing I could.
Oh, that's so interesting. So as soon as I tell you not to think of pink elephants, you couldn't stop thinking about them.
Not only just thinking about them, but I was visualizing a pink elephant in my head.
Did you try to replace the pink elephant with anything within the 30 seconds or to distract yourself?
Yeah, I had a water bottle in front of me and I was like, think of the water bottle, think of the water bottle. But I wasn't. I was still thinking of a pink elephant.
That's the thing with intrusive thoughts that we're going to talk about on this episode, is that the more we try to stop them, the more they persist. And even if we try to push them away or think of something else, at some point or another, that thought will come back to us. So Nadia, do you want to tell us about some common intrusive thoughts?
Of course. Here is one that I have myself and I hear about all the time. I want to drive myself off this bridge.
Oh my gosh, that one is so scary. And I have that one all the time as well. I remember I used to drive down the highway and like think, oh my God, I have so much control right now to just like merge.
It's frightening. Yeah. I used to travel for work. I used to actually go to clients' homes for therapy, and I would have to drive. I know you're not familiar, but there's a place called Hamilton, and it was about 40 minutes away. And there's this massive bridge that everyone from the area knows. And the whole time in that bridge, I'm trying to distract myself. Like you said, don't think about driving off this bridge. Don't think about driving off this bridge. Put the radio loud, focus on the water, literally anything else. And every time I'm thinking about driving off that bridge.
It's so scary how that happens, the intrusive thoughts. And also another one that's really common that I've heard of. I know the driving one has been a common one for myself, for you, for people I've talked to, but also sometimes when we just think of like hurting somebody we love with a knife when we're like chopping up the vegetables, it's like, okay, I could totally stab my best friend with this knife right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've gotten that one. I've also gotten the knife in my hand saying like, I could just chop off a finger.
Oh, yeah.
What would happen? I'd be fine. I'd just go to the hospital and it'd be okay.
The one I have with knives, mostly it's like, what if I lose control and I go crazy and then like I like stab myself or somebody else with this knife? It's almost like not necessarily I could, but what if it happens and it's out of my control?
Okay, that's interesting. I get something similar of what if this knife just drops and then stabs my foot?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. More other ones. Let's say I cook or I bake something. An hour later when I'm in bed, I'm thinking, did I poison everyone? Did I intentionally add poison to the recipe to make everyone die?
Mm-hmm. Another one is, what if I hurt my pet?
What if I hurt my pet present or like doing something that hurt them and then you're reflecting kind of like the poison?
Both. So like, what if I accidentally hurt my pet? And then what if I like threw my pet out the window? Or what if I squeezed it so hard that like, it hurt, it got hurt, like Norman. Like what if I squeezed him so hard and like he got hurt, I couldn't control myself.
Yeah, definitely ones I hear as well. Also, unwanted sexual thoughts about inappropriate individuals is a common one. Children, authority figures, family members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that one's a common one, and that one's actually one that most people are really afraid to talk about because it is so shameful and because it is, it comes with a lot of questions about ourselves, like if we have those type of thoughts, like why am I thinking that? And
Yeah.
a lot of people commit suicide because of thoughts like that because they're not aware of what's happening and they're worried about why it's happening.
And then they're questioning who they are as a person and all their
Mhm.
morals and everything that they've ever thought
Mhm.
they had or worked towards having.
Exactly. As you can imagine, there are probably so many more intrusive thoughts that we can have. And really, what is the definition of an intrusive thought?
So, intrusive thoughts are thoughts that come into our consciousness that are distressing, scary, and or shameful. We try really hard to push them away, but they seem to stick around and intrude and can cause us to feel shame and fear. We never want them and we never like them.
Hmm. So they're intrusive, right? So that means that they are there and you don't want them to be there. You don't want them to be there.
It-
They're intrusive. Otherwise, they wouldn't be intrusive because if
They're
we
uncomfortable.
so uncomfortable. You know, they're not there because you summoned them to be there or because you like to think about them. They are there because something is happening in your life and they just pop up and they're so scary.
Do you think that they happen to everybody?
I think so. I think all of us have intrusive thoughts. I know I've had intrusive thoughts. Like I said, some of the most common ones I've had are really about like driving myself off the road or like, oh my God, I could totally like die right now. I could jump off. Like I remember traveling and me and my husband were in Peru in Machu Picchu, which is like this huge cliff and it's like this beautiful scenery, but I can't shake the thought of like, I could totally like just take one step and I can just like die. And so, and that's not like I wanted to do it. I was on my honeymoon. It's a very like one of the best times of my life. And I never want to drive off the side of the road. It's just something that happens to us. And as a therapist, I've actually recognized how much more common it is because when clients come in and talk to me about it and they're telling me, oh my gosh, I have to tell you something. I've never told anyone this. And then they talk about it and, saying things like, I've had an intrusive thought about an unwanted sexual like thought with this person, this like child or this supervisor or this person that I'm not even attracted to or don't care for. And they don't really want to do it, but they have those thoughts. I started to realize that they were just so much more common than we initially thought. What about you?
Yeah. And now that I'm actually saying this out loud, I know I've come to this realization before, but it's more obvious now. There's always something around that's causing the intrusive thought. So I want to drive myself off a bridge while I'm in a car driving and there's a bridge. I'm cooking with a knife. I have a knife in my hand. I want to poison somebody. I had food to give them. I have sexual thoughts about inappropriate individuals. Maybe there are children around, or maybe I'm watching a specific movie that triggers the thought. So I think a lot of them are coming from us being in an environment and coming up with things subconsciously in our mind that can be harmful or scary to us. And sometimes it's just our mind's way of trying to protect ourselves in those situations because we are scanning for things that we would deem as dangerous or immoral or uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. So that's really important that you say that because do they mean anything? Like, do intrusive thoughts say anything about who we are as humans or our urges or values?
Absolutely not. Like you
No.
mentioned, every single person gets intrusive thoughts and they do not say anything about your character. They do not mean that anything is wrong with you, that you should feel shame, that should feel like you're a bad person. They are normal. They are happening to everybody.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's because we are in a state of anxiety. Sometimes it's because our mind is scanning the environment and thinking about ways we're in danger and ways that we need to protect ourselves. Sometimes it's about lack of control. But at the end of the day, it's never about your character and it's never
Right.
about who you are as a person.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the part where a lot of people get really caught up. So like a lot of I don't know how, if you see a lot of clients with intrusive thoughts, but when they come into my office and we talk about them, one of the main conversations that we're having about it is what are your thoughts and feelings behind these thoughts? Like what are you afraid these thoughts are going to do, right?
Right.
And, um, oftentimes they think, well, I shouldn't be having them. Like, I should not be having these thoughts. Obviously, something is wrong with me for having this intrusive thought.
Absolutely. I've seen similar things. And something that I've noticed is that you cannot challenge an intrusive thought with logic.
No, exactly.
There is
Exactly.
never logic there. We're not going to take out the CBT. We're not going to ask ourselves what the evidence for this thought is, what evidence goes against this thought. Logic will never win against an intrusive thought because they usually mean nothing and
Mhm.
are absolutely pointless.
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with a client today about this, about these thoughts that come in. And something that came up in session was talking about, we did this container activity where, I think I have a video about this on my TikTok, where you put your right hand underneath your left armpit, and then you take your left hand and you hug your right arm, and you sit, and you notice this is your container of all your emotions. And this comes from Dr. Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. And I find it helpful to like self-soothing. But one thing that came up during session while we were doing this was that your body, your physical body, contains all of these thoughts and emotions that you're having. It is contained within it, meaning that you are bigger than it. Just like the universe contains us and it is bigger than us, and we cannot control the sun rising and the sun setting, our thoughts and emotions cannot control our behaviors. And just that, like, we had a whole conversation about that. Like, it was like a 30-minute conversation and like going back and forth about it. And it was such an aha moment for my client when they realized that this this is your body and your behavior. So if you're having an urge to stab someone or jump out the window or drive your car off the side of the road, well, who is in control? You are in control. Those thoughts cannot do anything to you. You, at the end of the day, decide. And if it's not who you are, then you're not going to do them. So don't let them scare you because they cannot hurt you.
I love that. I was doing that along with you, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in control. Yeah, I'm the master of my body and my mind. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really powerful. And I think you kind of touched on it perfectly where you are in control. And if you are having these distressing, intrusive thoughts, it's kind of a reminder that they cause you discomfort for a reason and you're not going to act on them. You are not going to
Yeah.
have the urge to act on them because of what your morals are telling you and because of who you are. It wouldn't be as distressing if you were somebody who did want to act on these thoughts or did think these things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, control is huge. Control also gets tricky because sometimes these thoughts come because of too much control and sometimes they come because of a lack of control, right? So
Yeah.
too much control is I have control in this car, I can do anything I want right now. Lack of control is I'm standing over a bridge, what if someone pushes me and my child and we both fall in, and what
Mhm.
happens? So the intrusive thoughts are coming at every angle possible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Depending on the situation and the person and your circumstances. And they can really range from stuff that are not that big or maybe doesn't seem that big, but still causing the stress. Like, I suck. I'm not good enough. Is my boyfriend cheating on me? Do I love my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my family? Questioning your own self. And they can also range to things like, the more serious ones that are super scary. And I'm sure there's tons of more like really scary, intrusive thoughts that we didn't even mention because, they can be so, so scary. So like whatever scariest thought you've ever had in your life, about something and you were like, oh my gosh, why am I thinking about this? This is so wrong. I shouldn't be thinking about this. That would be considered an intrusive thought, right? Because it's like it comes out of nowhere. It's just this thought. It's scary and you don't know why you're thinking it. And sometimes, like you said, Nadia, it's like sometimes we have too much control, like in the car, and you recognize that you have control and that's scary. And then sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a really small bridge and I don't know what
What
could
could
happen. Yeah.
I find it so interesting that you saying things like "I suck" are considered intrusive thoughts as well. So negative self-talk
Mhm.
to any extent.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody would disagree with me on that, but I definitely do believe that because I think sometimes it's not just, these overwhelming urges, thought about urges or things that we want to do, but just thoughts about ourselves. So like I'm not enough, and just that repetitive nature of those thoughts in like multiple situations, or um I suck, I'm a terrible person. So actually a lot of people with who struggle with CPTSD and complex trauma, who come from a long history of, traumatic experiences, tend to have the intrusive thoughts of being an evil person, or being just a really bad human being, and like a somebody who nobody likes. And so yeah, on that level, definitely, I think they can be intrusive depending on how often they're happening and how distressing they are to the person.
That's so interesting. And I almost find power in labeling that negative self talk as an intrusive thought. Because
Mhm.
once you label that as an intrusive thought of all those things you're saying to yourself, I'm worthless, I don't deserve love, I suck, nobody likes me, it's like, well, intrusive thoughts aren't facts. So the second you label it as one, and the second you recognize that intrusive thoughts have no meaning behind them and they're not worth fighting, it's
Yeah.
almost like a weight gets lifted off your shoulders because it
Mhm.
brings you clarity that there's no truth behind that.
Mhm. And even if you don't want to label them as intrusive thoughts, because maybe you are having intrusive thoughts that are much scarier, and then you have the thought, I suck, I'm a terrible human, or whatever, and maybe you don't find that one as distressing as, like, let's say some of the other ones we've mentioned. You don't have to name them as intrusive thoughts, but just what you said, like recognizing that they are, thoughts, and don't say anything about who you are. I think that's the number one question that I get. It's like, what does it mean that I'm having this? What does it mean that I'm thinking about this thought? Does that mean that I need to be institutionalized? Does it mean that I need to be, be put away? Do I need to turn myself into the authorities? Like, what is happening here? Somebody keep people away from me, right? And the answer is always no. What do you want to do? Do you want to throw yourself out the window? Do you want to hurt your friend or family member? Do you want to poison someone? Would you actually do that? And they're like, no, like, no. Why would I ever want to do that? And then the answer is, well, then that's intrusive. It's not, it doesn't say anything about you, your urges, your values, who you are, who you view yourself to be, anything you'll ever want to do. So take a deep breath and remind yourself, I'm having a thought. This
Real.
is not me. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And exactly kind of in the definition that we said, they're distressing, they're scary, and they can be shameful. Ask yourself those three questions.
Mhm.
Is this stressing me out? Am I scared about this? Is this causing me shame? Yeah. Okay. It's intrusive. There's no truth behind it.
Yeah. Do you know what causes people to experience intrusive thoughts?
Like we mentioned before, I think generally most people do experience intrusive thoughts. I know if you struggle, like you said, with PTSD, CPTSD, anxiety, or OCD, they're more common. I
Mhm.
think if we are experiencing anxiety and we're in an environment that is triggering to us and we are kind of in a state of hyperarousal, our flight or fight kicks in. We might have more intrusive thoughts. They might come more often. They might be more scary. It might take longer for them to go away.
Yeah.
I know we briefly talked about entering an environment, scanning the environment, which is common for anxiety and our subconscious thinking about all the ways that we might be unsafe or in harm. And then those intrusive thoughts coming from that. But overall, I think almost every single person in the world does experience them. I don't think they're talked about enough, which is why we feel so much shame behind them because we're embarrassed. But I
Mhm.
think they're more common than anyone believes.
The embarrassed part, that one, I think is one of the major reasons why people don't talk about them. Embarrassment and shame, right? Like it's like we shouldn't be having these thoughts. And I think people will, like, if you were to like just blurt out what you were thinking, depending on your audience, like if I were to say it in front of my husband, I'm pretty sure he'd look at me and be like, are you having high anxiety? But if I were to say it at work somewhere around people that don't know me, they might be fearful. So I guess like really acknowledging like where we are, but like really understanding that these are so common. So if you feel embarrassed about them, or if you feel a deep sense of shame because you're having them, to not, be so hard on yourself because of that, because that's just a natural part of who we are, especially if you're living in a high stress environment or have been through so much in your life. Because
Yeah,
like you
that's what
said,
I
it's like
wanted
that
to ask.
heightened arousal.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say you work from a trauma informed approach. So I'm assuming you see this often.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of the clients I see from a trauma-informed approach, any anxiety type of symptom is seen as what we call hyper arousal. So anger, anxiety, irritability, inability to sit still, intrusive thoughts, worry thoughts. What's happening in your body from that perspective is there is a perceived threat. Or maybe there's an actual threat. So if you're in an actual environment that's dangerous to you, let's say that you're living with a family that isn't safe. Maybe you have narcissistic parents, maybe you have emotionally unavailable parents, maybe you have a partner living with you at home who is not, it's a rocky relationship. In those types of situations, we might go into our stress responses, and you have, your fight, flight, freeze, and the intrusive thoughts fall under more of the hyper, because it's constant scanning of the environment, constant alertness. So you're in that hyper aroused state to get ready to fight or run from a threat. And so that's where those thoughts come in. That's from a trauma informed perspective. So in that sense, we kind of work on regulating that nervous system and recognizing that, hey, like, am I in danger right now? Like, where's this thought coming from? What am I afraid will happen? And just kind of processing through those open-ended type questions and regulating the nervous system. But like you said earlier, like, it does not help to sit there and challenge, because most of the time people that are having intrusive thoughts or have been through trauma, they know that these thoughts, like, they're like, okay, well, do I have evidence that I'm going to stab someone? Well, no, I don't have evidence that I'm going to stab someone. Do I have
Right.
evidence that I'm not going to stab someone? Well, no, I
Also
don't have
no.
evidence. So it could
And then you're scared and you're like, I don't have evidence for, I don't have evidence against. My mind's telling me I'm going to stab somebody. It's, yeah,
yeah,
no
yeah.
logic. Logic does not win.
No, and like, I remember when I first became a therapist, because when you first become a therapist, what they teach you in school is like that challenging. And I remember, sorry to my first clients, because I remember trying to challenge that and, like, working through the CBT model for that sometimes. And I remember, I feel like sometimes clients are really nice and they want to be like, yeah, okay, here's evidence against it. But like, you could tell internally, they were like, fuck, like, like, I don't think,
Yeah.
I'm just saying this to, like, so I caught on, and then we started kind of working, a different way. But I remember, like, just being in so much distress, like, why isn't this working?
Right. I know, like working for your clients, but also working for myself, because I would use CBT to challenge intrusive thoughts. And we talked about this in the first episode where the intrusive thoughts were like, okay, I'm going to get robbed.
Uh-huh.
Someone's coming to my house and someone's going to knock on my door and then rob me and tie me up and whatever worst case scenario. And that's coming from past trauma of where something similar happened.
Hmm.
So using that logic, this has happened before. It's not going to help me,
Yeah.
especially if you're somebody who's experienced trauma, PTSD, CPTSD, and you're looking for patterns. You're
Hmm.
not going to feel better about it if it's something similar has happened in the past. And
Oh,
as many times it hasn't happened after that, that's not helping. You're focused on that one specific thing. So yeah, CBT for intrusive thoughts, I mean, might work for some people. If it's
mhm.
working for you, keep going. But
I think if it's like one of those thoughts about, like, where it could be helpful is, like, let's say you're having relationship intrusive thoughts where, maybe your partner has never cheated on you, but you continuously have that
Mhm.
thought. So it could be helpful, I guess, in some cases. But I guess, like, with therapy, and this is very important that we all know, like, everybody's so different, right? So, like, if CBT has helped your intrusive thoughts, by all means, like, don't stop, because we're all so different.
I agree. But
Yeah.
I also think that an intrusive thought is different than an anxious or obsessive thought. And an intrusive thought is hard to get reassurance and to work through because it will probably come back. So all
Yeah.
you're going to be doing is that mental review of that intrusive thought. And it's almost like a compulsion where it's
Yeah.
enabling the intrusive thought. If it's something that is kind of a one-off and you
Mhm.
have that intrusive thought and doesn't really come back, but if it's something you're struggling with more often, challenging will give you that immediate relief, but it's not benefiting you
Exactly.
really in any way
Yeah.
in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. So really, I guess it would be important for people to understand the difference between an anxious thought and an intrusive thought.
Yeah. And I hope our definition helps with that.
Yeah, so, remembering it's like unwanted, it's usually really intense and distressing is the key word. I think it's, really distressing. And typically intrusive thoughts are just, they come like just out of nowhere, they intrude on your life and they don't say anything about who you are. So if you have a high anxiety, naturally and you're anxious about your partner cheating on you, that might be more of an anxious thought. But if you're not somebody who typically thinks about those things, or maybe don't even like, there's something that's not even in your environment, that might be happening and you're having these thoughts constantly like coming in, then it could be an intrusive thought. But I think, the level of distress is a big
Mhm.
um key point in that, what is an intrusive thought and what is an anxious thought. So, what do you think? Do you agree with that, or did I miss something there?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think if you are somebody who is struggling with anxiety, generalized anxiety, whatever it may be, it's probably might take some time and might take some patterns. And I find that I do this with clients as well, but it's noticing the difference between an anxious thought and an intrusive thought. And sometimes that'll come down to the physical response.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes your anxiety will show up in physical ways where the intrusive thought might not. And
Exactly.
I find that is the case for many things. Sometimes an intrusive thought can hit so hard that it gives us that physical reaction. But if you do have anxiety disorder, whatever it may be, pay attention to your body. And that might be the sign telling you the difference between the two.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that it can get kind of like tricky because for me, I also sometimes get like I know with the car one, I would get like tingly legs. I don't know if you've ever had that tingly leg sensation when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
okay, so it's I would for me it was like the key difference. This is personal because, for everybody like Nadia said, like you want to pay attention to different cues on like your body. For me personally, identifying what an intrusive thought was something that went completely against what I believed I would do or say, or be as a human. So like I didn't at the point when I was having intrusive thoughts about driving my car off the road when I was driving to work, I was not suicidal, I was not depressed, I was not, like, going through anything in my life at that point where I felt like I wanted to find ways out. And so having that thought was like, "Where the heck is this coming from? This is not normal, like, this is not okay." And I remember this was before I was a therapist and just, like, freaking myself out over these things. So I guess that could be a thing too. It's
Mhm.
like what's going on in your life. Because if you have a lot of stuff going on in your life and this just start popping up, it could be anxiety related versus if this is like consistent and like ongoing and you're good and you're still having intrusive thoughts. You're not doing good and you're still having intrusive thoughts. And so it could be a really
Yeah.
important distinction.
That's a great way to pay attention to things for sure. I think another important point is intrusive thoughts will try to attack things you love the most about other people or things that you love the most about yourself. One that we didn't really cover is embarrassing yourself in public. So
Oh,
going into the
yes.
mall and just screaming or being in a restaurant and just standing on the table and getting up and throwing stuff
Yes.
around, whatever it may be.
Yes.
Those ones are super common that I
Mhm.
see
Yeah,
too.
I
And
used
kind
to
of
have those.
impulsive.
Did
Yeah.
you ever have those? I
Oh,
had
yeah.
those.
In my lecture at first year university, there'd be
Mhm.
hundreds of people. And I'm like, what would it be like if I just started screaming at the top of my lungs? And then the other side of me is like, what
Mhm.
the hell are you thinking about? Shut that down. That's not going to happen. But those are
Yes.
common. Yeah.
Yes, I had something very similar, like in meetings at work when before I was a therapist, I was working at the college and I'd be at a meeting and I'm like, what if I stood up and be like, this is stupid? Or, just get up and start dancing. I remember like I would have, sometimes they were hilarious. Like they were just not a scary one, but like they would distress me because I would think, what if I can't control, again, this was like, what if I can't control myself? And this is like me about to like jump up and do something I'm not supposed to do.
Yeah. Oh, lack of control. Does it ever happen? This has happened to me so many times where you have an intrusive thought and then you're like, oh my God, can people read my mind? People must think
Yes.
I'm effed up right now if they can listen to what I'm thinking. And then you're like looking around the environment, making sure no one's staring at you. Because if
Mhm.
they are, then they know you're crazy and they know you're having these intrusive thoughts.
Yes, and, like, trying to control your mind so that, like, they don't read your mind.
And then you're like, I love everybody. I love this store.
You're
You're
so
just
pretty.
messed up.
I love your outfit. Yeah,
That
everything is
girl's beautiful. Yeah.
I think that got really bad for me when there was that movie that came out, What Women Want, and he started being able to read, like, all the women's brains, like, all their thoughts.
Oh,
And, like, I remember at that time period, that's when I started having those because I saw that movie and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what if somebody is out there that could read my mind?" And I would, like, remember thinking about all of these things at, like, school and work and just being like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, like, I'm such a nice person, like, trust me." So
Yeah, it's so funny. See, it's funny how common they are and how many shared experiences just me and you have. Imagine so
yeah,
many other people
yeah.
relating. From a trauma perspective, or I know you practice acceptance and commitment therapy a lot, what's maybe a tip or a technique that you recommend to clients who are struggling with intrusive thoughts?
First, I wanna say that, like, obviously, we're laughing about some of the intrusive thoughts that are not as serious, but I don't wanna I don't think I can say enough how much scarier they can be than what we're mentioning, and so just keep in mind that if we didn't name yours, if they're the scariest thought you ever thought of, they're still not going to control you, and that's really what I do with my clients. So, like I said, with my clients that are, um faced a lot of trauma in their life growing up. I do a lot of like separation between thought and reality, and I also do a lot of nervous system regulation because when somebody comes in with an intrusive thought, typically they're feeling really distressed. So you're scared. And when you're scared, you're in that, fight or flight response. And so they're like really like tense about who they are. They're not feeling well. So we kind of ground a little bit first. And then after we ground and we kind of get to that point where they know how to ground themselves, know how to, deal with the body being all out of whack, then we kind of come in and say, okay, what's the thought? And we do a little bit of exposure work in terms of the thought. So saying something like, okay, what's your distressing thought, Nadia? What is your distressing thought?
I have a heater in my room, and my distressing thought is what if I put it to the hottest thing possible and then just hold my hand there?
Okay. And then possibly like burn yourself and
Burn
hurt yourself.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when that happens, what happens to your body?
It's a weird sense of control. Like it's a weird tense up because I feel so uncomfortable with the amount of control that I have. And then it's a little bit of butterflies in the stomach
So
because,
you
yeah.
bring awareness to that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like bring awareness to that sensation in your body, bring awareness to the tense up that you experience. Take a breath and kind of instruct your body to be calm in some sort of grounding technique that we've worked on. So it could be that container exercise. It could be, doing something like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 if you're so distressed. But if you're not so distressed, then saying something, one of the things that really helps is saying, I'm having the thought that I want to put my hand up against the heater until my hand burns.
Mhm.
And that is part of acceptance and commitment therapy by naming a thought as a thought by simply creating that separation. So adding that phrase, I'm having the thought prior to the thought, gives your brain just an extra second or two to recognize that it's a thought. Plus, the fact that you're bringing awareness to the here and now by you just saying, I'm having the thought, what you've done is you've taken your body out of fight or flight, which is, that part of us that just wants to like escape or like fight something. And when we're saying that, what we're saying is, hey, I have enough control over my body and mind that I can recognize that what I'm having is a thought. So it's a form of like a mindful thinking, to where you're bringing that awareness. And then what ends up happening is it takes you out of that fight or flight for that brief period of time. Plus, it reminds you that your thoughts are not facts. You can even go a step further and say, I'm noticing myself having the thought, which means that you're noticing yourself as an individual in this present moment having this thought. Again, getting you out of that fight or flight response.
Yeah. And if anyone's wondering, with acceptance and commitment therapy, this is called thought diffusion. And it's one of the first steps to thought diffusion. But just by speaking to yourself and acknowledging that you're having the thought, or noticing or being aware that you're having the thought, you're almost separating yourself from the thought. So now it no longer consumes you, but it's something you're looking at from more of an outside perspective. And the whole goal of that is to just learn to look at it in a non-judgmental lens. You're
Mhm.
looking at the thought, you're not dissecting the thought, you're not trying to judge yourself for the thought, you're not mad at yourself from the thought, you're
Mhm.
just viewing yourself having the thought.
Yes. And one important thing with acceptance and commitment therapy and the diffusion techniques that a lot of people, when they first start doing it, they kind of get really confused by, is they're trying to find the measure of reduced anxiety, which is not the purpose of it.
Not the purpose. Yeah.
The purpose of it is to recognize it as a thought and recognize yourself as a human being in this world having this thought. And naturally, throughout time, when we continuously practice this stuff, yeah, typically people report feeling lower levels of anxiety. But remember the activity that we did at the beginning of the at the podcast, when I said don't think of pink elephants. As soon as we tell ourselves don't think of something, as soon as we tell ourselves don't have anxiety, I should have reduced anxiety, I shouldn't be thinking about this, that's what our brain automatically clings on to even more. Our brain does not like to think in negatives. It does not like being told what to do. So recognize and name, right? What do you do with your clients when they're
Yeah,
having
I
intrusive
do
thoughts?
exactly that. The same thing as you. One thing that I like to mention, if intrusive thoughts are extremely common, then following those exact steps that Micheline said, where you're acknowledging, you're trying to separate yourself a little bit. But the whole point is to acknowledge the thought, but also sit in the anxiety. So you're not sitting in the after effect of the thought. You're, like I said, you're not challenging and getting deeper to the thought. Instead, you're sitting with the discomfort of anxiety and acknowledging that you had the thought. It sounds confusing, but it's mostly just separating yourself from the intrusive thought while acknowledging that you're experiencing anxiety in the moment, and then allowing yourself to explore, maybe regulate and sit in that anxiety. Challenging the thought, judging yourself for the thought, or going deeper with it is going to cause more anxiety, and it's going to not make it go away. Like we said, that mental review can be a compulsion, and it will enable the intrusive thoughts. So you do want to acknowledge the anxiety that you're having. You don't want to push that aside. You don't want to tell yourself that you don't want to experience that anxiety. Instead, you want to sit in that while acknowledging that you had a thought that caused you distress. And a way that you can do this, and an actual visualization that I do, is putting the thought into a cloud and then envisioning that cloud passing by you slowly. And you're just observing it from the outside. So you're literally looking at the thought in a cloud going past you. And then once it's out of sight, it's hopefully out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a mindfulness, meditation, grounding technique that helps you observe the thought from a non-judgmental lens.
Yeah, I love that, because what you're saying is that, you know, I read a quote the other day, I actually posted it to my Instagram story, and it said, one of the issues with Western medicine is that we try to get rid of like pain or anything else. You can put anxiety in there or whatever.
Right.
When really we want to learn how to work with it and use it to our advantage, because it is needed, right? We need these things are protectors. So you learning, when you're saying that activity of like sitting down and watching them kind of float on a cloud, you're essentially saying, I'm recognizing you as a thought,
Mhm.
and I'm recognizing you can come in. And the key there, I think, I don't know if you've experienced this with clients, but initially when we do activities like that, they're like, oh my gosh, but it keeps coming back. What do you do when it keeps coming back and you're doing that activity?
I recommend them practicing more and more with it. And like I said, sitting with the anxiety,
Mhm.
but acknowledging that that's likely going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not so easy. I know we're making it seem like it's so easy. Think about the thought floating by you and then it's out. It's not. It takes practice, and it takes practice learning to sit with that discomfort and not wanting to immediately react and respond to those things. So it might take some
Yeah.
time, but I would just recommend
Yeah.
doing it again. What are you thinking?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things that, again, don't try to get rid of it. So as soon as a client says to me, well, I just put this thought on a cloud or whatever visualization they choose, a leaf on a stream or whatever, and it went by and then it came back. And they're like, why did that happen? That shouldn't have happened. My answer is, okay, let's put the shoulds on the cloud and let it float by. And let's put that thought again on the cloud and let it float by. And it might come back 145 times. And what we do 145 times is put it on the cloud and watch it float by. Because what you're doing there is you're not trying to get rid of the thought, you're simply separating yourself from the thought. And the most important part of this is go in this with an open mind and non-judgment. So if you find yourself saying, this activity is hard, put it on a cloud and watch it float by. If you find yourself saying, I can't do this right, put it on a cloud and watch it float by. If you're thinking to yourself, I suck at this, put it on a cloud and watch it float by. So like literally any thought that you have while you're doing this activity is put on a cloud or a leaf or whatever visualization. Again, you could, it could be little sheep jumping over the fence if you're trying to sleep at night. Does not matter, but just doesn't matter how many times they come back, you're not doing it wrong.
The more times they come back, the less meaning they have each time. And you will acknowledge that as you're going through it. You keep putting the same thought on a cloud over and over again. Eventually, you're going to get tired of it. Eventually, it's like repeating a word so many times, it starts to feel unreal. It starts to feel weird and you don't understand why. But it's just
Yeah.
almost because you're over it. And
Yes.
I think that's what's going to happen, or that is what does happen for me too when I keep doing it over and over again. And then I'm just like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm done. It went by so
Yeah.
many times. It means nothing.
It means
But
nothing.
it's an important thing with intrusive thoughts to try your hardest not to attach a meaning to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're
Yeah.
having an intrusive thought of like doing something bad to your best friend. Don't attach the meaning that you're a bad person. Don't attach the meaning that you don't like your best friend. Don't attach the meaning that you have to be scared around your best friend all the time because you're scared that you're going to do something wrong behind them. Just accept it for the intrusive thought that it is without trying to make it more than that, which is
Yes.
obviously easier said than done, but
Yes, but remember what we said. We said it means nothing about you. So as soon as you start, here's the key. Don't engage. As soon as you start to engage with the thought, as soon as a thought comes in and you start to say, I shouldn't be having this thought. Why am I having this thought? What does this mean about me? When you're questioning that thought, what you've done is you've let that thought pick you up and whip you around side to side. And now you're spending your whole day thinking about it. But if you say to yourself, this is a thought, I'm watching it on a stream and I choose not to engage in it. So I choose to, yeah, maybe I have a question about it, but I'm going to choose not to answer it. And I'm going to choose to redirect my attention and bring back my focus to the present moment. So if I am working on homework, I'm going to have that thought, I'm going to watch it float by, and then I'm going to go back to my assignment and it's going to come back and I'm going to put it on a cloud and I'm going to watch it float by. And I'm going to go back to my assignment. In the end, when you continue to not engage with it, think of your brain as a really annoying little kid that wants to show you their drawing. And the more you're like, no, not now. They're like, mommy, 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 mommy. And you're like, no, no, no. They're going to throw a tantrum. They're going to go crazy. They're going to throw stuff off the table. And then as soon as you turn to them and you're like, what do you want? And they say, here's my picture. Do you like it? And you're like, yes, I like it. Okay, good. And then they leave.
right.
You want to notice, give it the quick attention that it needs. Just notice, what is this? This is a thought. This is what's happening. Is it trying to tell me something in terms of like, am I anxious about something? Am I hungry? Do I need to eat? Do I need to call my mom? Like, you know, something and then redirect, and you're going to disarm it so much more in that way than trying to push it away.
I love that. You spend almost an hour, 30 minutes to an hour trying to avoid it for something that'll take potentially much shorter than that just to put your attention to it. But to kind of summarize what you said, your thoughts don't have power over you until you give them power.
Exactly.
Until you decide to engage, until you decide to question, fight it off, whatever it may be, then you're giving them that power. But
Right.
when you're observing, it's very different.
Exactly. And now think of this is another activity you and I were talking about, and this also comes from ACT therapy, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. When if you don't believe that your thoughts don't control you, Nadia and I are going to do this. If you're watching this on video, you're going to see it. If you're not watching this on video, just do it with us. So I want you to say out loud over and over again, I can't raise my hand. And at the same time, raise your hand. So like, I can't raise my hand or my hands, right? Can you say it too, Nadia?
I can't raise my hand.
Oh, look, you're doing it.
Oh, look, so are you.
Yeah. I can't shake my head. No. And then shake your head. No.
I can't shake my head. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's like mind blowing sometimes when we see that, like, you are not your thoughts and your thoughts can't control you. And
your thoughts are not facts.
They're not facts because we just said that and we did it.
They are not true.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hardest things with intrusive thoughts, and this can also flow into anxiety and OCD, is that letting go of a thought is not accepting the thought. So letting go of the thought that you are a bad person doesn't mean you're accepting the fact that you're a bad person. It just means you choose in that moment to let it go and not give it power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something is probably the hardest part with intrusive thoughts. At least I find with myself and with my clients.
Yeah, it is really hard because it does cause that physical reaction. I know you mentioned earlier about like sitting with the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
So sitting with the anxiety, I would say more specifically focusing on the anxiety and not the intrusive thought. So I'm having the intrusive thought in my room where I want to put my hand up to the heater and then burn myself. Instead of putting meaning to that thought and trying to understand and questioning if I want to hurt myself or whatever it may be, it did make me anxious. It did cause butterflies in my stomach, and it did cause, that fear in my body, not fear, that feeling in my body. So just zoning into that. Okay, I'm feeling those butterflies in my stomach. Is there a grounding exercise I can do right now? Is this anxiety trying to tell me something else? Kind of like you mentioned, am I hungry? Is there something else going on? Reflecting on my day, reflecting on other things that may have caused me anxiety that maybe I need to pay more attention to. And then maybe doing a quick progressive muscle relaxation technique exercise, or maybe doing some affirmations, which usually affirmations help me in that moment, self-compassion affirmations, not those unrealistic ones we've talked about, but just really zoning into my needs based on my anxiety in that moment.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of the affirmations that might be helpful for intrusive thoughts?
So I have some created that I often give to clients who struggle with OCD or intrusive thoughts, but I think that they can be beneficial. All the affirmations I use or I create with my clients together come from a self-compassionate lens. They don't come from unrealistic looking in the mirror, telling myself I am brave, I am beautiful, things that maybe you don't believe in that moment. So here are some of them that I have written down. We kind of talked about some of these already. The first one is letting a thought go is not accepting a thought. The second one is in this moment, I choose to let this thought pass. Third one is just because it's my thought does not mean it's true. Fourth one is my thoughts have power over me only if I give them power. The fifth one is I could observe my thoughts without attaching meaning to them. Seventh one, struggling is a human experience. It's okay to feel what I'm feeling. And the last one is I'm proud of my efforts to deal with my thoughts. So coming from a non-judgmental lens where you're kind of like not so hard on yourself and showing yourself the love you kind of probably need in those moments.
Oh yeah, I love those. Those are all really helpful. And I love that they're all workable affirmations, because just like you, I don't like the ones where it's like lipstick all over the mirror saying, I'm a badass bitch and I'm amazing, because let's be honest, a lot of times we don't even believe that.
Right. Like the I am healthy, I am wealthy, I am rich, I am that bitch. Those
Yes. As much as I love that song.
they hype you up a little bit. They make
Yeah.
you feel good, but it's really hard to believe them when
Mhm.
you don't believe them, you know?
Actually, there's research that shows that they could be more harmful when you don't believe them because they feed into the cycle of shame.
I mean,
So,
that's happened to me before, right? Like if you're somebody who's struggling with body image, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're telling yourself, I love my body. And then you're like, what the fuck? No, I don't. I hate this about my body. I hate this about my body. And then you spiral.
yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, my therapist or the internet or these self-help books are telling me that I need to engage in this affirmation. So then it becomes a chore because you're not even paying attention to it. And it's every morning, I love my body. I love myself. When you don't, and it's not helping. And this is personal. And this has not worked for me in the past. And it's something I see in therapy. Some
Mhm.
people swear by it. I mean, if it works for you, same thing like CBT
Yeah.
in specific situations, do your thing. Like, great, I'm happy.
Yeah, I find like if you don't have a high level of distress, it might work for you. What I noticed again, this was one mistakes from a therapist series. When I was first starting out, I remember because like you read about affirmations and you think, okay, so I remember giving some of my clients like, okay, well, affirm to yourself, put it on your phone and like put it a reminder, and when the reminder goes off, like you just say them to yourself. And I remember like my client would come back and be like, that's not working. As a matter of fact, every time my alarm goes off, I just ignore it because I know exactly what it is. And then they started feeling bad about not doing it. And so at that point, that's what like prompted me to like look more into that. I'm like, why isn't this working? And so then I started doing more research on it. And that's when I found that like if you are going to do affirmations, they have to be workable ones. They have to be things like, I am working on loving myself. I am working on accepting my thoughts. So if you can't get to the point of saying, I choose to let my thoughts go, even if you can't get there, if that's too much for you, then say to yourself, I am working on choosing to let my thoughts go.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am working on recognizing that this is an intrusive thought.
I love that. Yeah, that holds a lot of power too. And you're just showing yourself that you're putting in that effort and you should be proud.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, because you give yourself permission to not be perfect. And
Mm.
that's the issue I think a lot of people have with affirmations is that constant need for like, oh, well, I'm saying this, but I don't even believe it.
Yeah.
But how can we not believe that we're working on something if we really want to work on it? We
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of self-compassion and therapy work as well. It's acknowledging that you're struggling and it's reminding yourself that you're doing what you can to help yourself struggling in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've covered a good lot with intrusive thoughts, like what they mean. So we talked to you about what they mean, and just to recap here, they mean absolutely nothing about who you are, your urges, or your values. We talked about when they come up, just to kind of follow back around. It's when we're high stress. They do come with anxiety disorders sometimes, not all the time, right? So
Mhm.
everybody has them for different reasons. And we also gave you some awesome tips that you can try out, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to push the thoughts away, like are we still thinking about pink elephants?
No. We did think about them for a little bit,
Yeah.
but now we're ready to let them go.
We're ready. Yeah, pink elephant wants to be there. I'm gonna take a look at that pink elephant for a little while. I'm gonna admire its pink color because that's cute.
Beautiful.
And then I'm gonna turn my attention to recording this podcast.
Yeah. We do want to mention that if you are experiencing intrusive thoughts and it is impacting your day to day, then it is worth it to reach out to a professional if you have accessibility to resources. Only if it's really impacting you and you feel like it's getting in the way of the way you used to live your life or the way you want to live your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sometimes it's we can self-help with these things, but sometimes they get to the point where they're so distressing that if you don't, can't control them or help yourself on your own, then and it's getting worse, then definitely reach out to a professional. We'll definitely be probably talking more about how to reach out to a professional in future episodes, and especially for those of you who don't have access. So maybe finding you some good ways to find access as well. So that should be helpful.
Yeah, resources in both Canada and the United States that maybe be more affordable.
Well, we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, go ahead and leave us an amazing review. We love reading those if you haven't done so already. And if you haven't been following us on Instagram at Anxious Like You, please go ahead and give us a follow. That way you'll stay up to date on all of our upcoming episodes and any amazing things that we're doing, such as live events and anything else that might come up in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join the Anxious Like You community by following at Anxious Like You on Instagram. See you in the next episode.